Emergency Landing, Apple TV Plus's latest espionage thriller gets off to quite the tense start. With an uneasy atmosphere clinging to every facet of this production, Apple's acquisition of Can 11's Israeli series is a smart one. It not only shows the ambition of this juggernaut company in following Netflix's international reach, it's one that, so far at least, gets off to a flying start. Episode 1 of Tehran begins in Amman, Jordan as Flight 159 departs to New Delhi. A young woman dressed in a niqab boards a plane. As we find out later in the episode, her name is Tamer, and she's working with Mossad. A man sits next to her and promises that everything will be okay. Only two people, Shira and Yoni, board the plane and clearly stand out for the wrong reasons. As they sit and take a selfie together, the plane takes off. Unfortunately, they hit turbulence, which happens to be a malfunctioning engine. The pilot confirms the group are touching down at Tehran before continuing on to India. Only, this isn't going to pose well for Yoni and Shira given they're Israelis. Fearing for their lives, the plane touches down and the pair are forced to leave the airplane. As they head out the plane, Shira and Yoni are forced to hand over their passports and follow security through the busy terminal. On the way, Shira throws up before being allowed into the bathroom momentarily. There, she notices one of the women in the bathroom, Tamer, whom she recognizes from a previous work gig. She's changed clothes with a flight attendant called Gila. Adopting the niqab, she sits with the man posing as her husband, Milad. He asks for the codes, but she doesn't know them. Nor will she know until 6 p.m. that night. At Mossad headquarters, the group receive a call from Tehran airport. Milad phones reiterates what he's just been told, meaning they've got 4 hours until the codes are handed over. Yoni and Shira meanwhile are taken into the interrogation room, and where Shira is forced to put a headscarf on. While they await their fate, Tamer leaves the airport dressed as a pilot. She writes a message on her phone confirming that 2 Israelis have been detained at the airport. News of this reaches a man named Faraz, who busies himself with the next steps. He shows up at the airport and separates the two, speaking to Shira alone. He asks about Tamer and the incident inside the bathroom. After a brief slap across the face, Shira admits they served together on the base, but she was in charge of soldier welfare. This means she isn't entirely sure what the nature of Tamer's job was. Faraz phones his superior, who tells him to let the woman go. They don't want an international situation right now, but Faraz is persistent, determined to get to the bottom of what this means. He asks to see the CCTV footage for the women's restroom. When Tamer arrives at her destination, Gila's husband anxiously asks how Gila is getting on. Tamer confirms everything has gone well as Tamer rings Mossad and finds out about the codes. One of her contacts is an Iranian hacker who may be able to help. Heading online, she manages to convince him to crack the codes. Not long after, Tamer stands in front of the mirror and starts applying makeup. She's determined to look like Gila, but it may be too late for her. Faraz is closing in. This wily security agent checks the CCTV footage and realizes that Tamer and Gila have switched. Meanwhile, Mossad learn that their agent is in position as Tamer infiltrates Gila's work. She hacks into the main console and asks her hacker for the codes. Eventually she cracks it and starts hacking the system. Only, she's not alone. The connection is severed midway through as a man approaches her and starts chasing Tamer through the building. He tries forcing himself on her, but she's too strong and knocks him out. Unfortunately, when he hits the ground, he starts bleeding out as a figure approaches from a Episode 2 of Tehran wastes absolutely no time picking up the pieces left behind last time. Tamer meets the Eagle, who happens to be her point of contact. With the big boss dead and no cameras in sight, he works with Tamer to cover up this murder. With Tamer flustered, the Eagle phones Mossad and lets them know what the situation is. Passing the phone over to the girl, she apologizes and promises to complete the mission. With less than 50 minutes to go, time is of the essence. Tamer manages to get back in the system, and the mission resumes like normal. Unfortunately, things take a turn for the worst when someone finds the body outside. Eagle phones Tamer and gives her the bad news. She still needs 15 or 20 minutes to finish, which Eagle sucks his teeth to and pleads with her to hurry up. Police soon show up and start to scour the area. As they enter the building, Tamer is forced to operate Fox on the run, which is a ploy to break up communications and destroy evidence. Eagle phones Mossad and tells them to be prepared for the worst. Inside, Tamer, still dressed as Gila, takes her place along with the other workers as they're questioned one by one. Tamer seizes her opportunity and asks one of the officers to use the bathroom. There, she phones Eagle and updates on the situation. She then goes on to admit Geyser Giler's boyfriend is the only other person who knows her identity. At Tehran headquarters, Fares continues to watch the footage. He's intent on finding out whether his theory of the body switch holds true. In particular, he wants to find out who the two visitors were and wants passports checked. Ali follows up on Tamer and manages to get a statement from the taxi driver. He reveals that the woman was picked up and spoke fluently. Tamer meanwhile is called in for questioning. She spins a story about her boss screaming, but remains adamant she doesn't know why. The interviewer is cunning though, and asks Tamer about her personal phone calls. One of the other workers, Sarah, backed up their theories that Tamer is involved in some way. Eventually that leads to him asking outright whether she and her boss fought. The interviewer is convinced that Tamer's lying. For now, she's being kept in custody for the night. Fares gets confirmation that there was a switch, backed up by the passport changing over in India. He asks Ali to email everything over as he realizes they need to search for a woman adopting Gila's identity. He phones through to the police currently keeping Tamer captive, and she's forced to head off with the officers. Only it's not actually Fares on the phone. It turns out she's been taken back home to speak to a social worker called Majgan. She reveals that Geyser took his own life. He also left a note confirming that he killed Gila's boss. It's here Tamer realizes this is the handiwork of Eagle, covering tracks to make sure she's not incriminated. Sensing he may not be completely trustworthy, Tamer bolts from the scene. It's just in time to as Fares enters the building looking for her. Chasing the girl through the streets, Tamer decides against getting in the car with Eagle and evades capture. In the process, she loses her veil and the plaster across her nose. With the coast clear, she rings Mossad and confirms that she's breaking contact with the Eagle. She doesn't trust him and suspects he's compromised. Fares meanwhile heads back to the station and tries to hide his frustration. The police won't let him distribute the picture of Gila. They want the fish to head toward the bait instead. With nowhere else to turn, Tamer heads up and visits a woman at her house. It turns out this woman is actually her aunt, and she needs a plate of Jasmine's Girl, Episode 3 of Tehran begins with Arizu speaking to Tamer about her situation. She pleads with her aunt for help given what's happened in the past. Back at her house, her daughter and husband arrive and introduce her to the family. Arizu lies, revealing Tamer's there because of marital problems, and manages to give her a safe place to stay for now. Meanwhile in Bat Yam, Israel, a woman named Mordecai learns about the family connected to Tamer. She phones through to the Eagle and gives him the lowdown on what's going on as Tamer starts to run out of places to hide. As the Eagle closes in on her, Tamer finds solitude in her hacker friend and starts speaking to him. Communicating in English, Tamer agrees to meet, but needs a passport in order to get out of Iran. After some thinking, he agrees to help if she can help with something for him. For now, he remains tight-lipped over exactly what that may be. Back at the crime scene, Fares looks around before noticing a neighbor nearby. He questions her, and the woman confirms that Jira doesn't have any friends. Getting nowhere and with the scene clean, far too clean to be an accident, Fares asks Ali for an update. He goes through the CCTV footage and finds a car that may be connected to all this. They're not able to find the license plate, but do notice an eagle emblem on the side. This leads them directly to a travel agency known as Tabrizi Tours. Masad Tabrizi happens to be the owner, which is who our Eagle is. Realizing that his gig may be up, Eagle phones Mossad and finds more details out about Fares, the man chasing him, determined to trick him instead. Tamer leaves her aunt's, thanking her profusely for help. She heads out and meets Sick Boy, her hacker contact, and he asks her for assistance. specifically that assistance comes from messing up the traffic so he can lead a protest. With the security cameras offline, Faraz realizes something is up as Tamer messes up the security camera feeds. Begrudgingly, Tamer agrees to tag along with Sick Boy, needing her passport. This protest soon turns violent as Tamer watches from afar and wisely covers her face. As Arzu learns about Tamer being present at the protest, her and her husband realize it's not wise keeping Tamer there any longer and contemplate kicking her out. After the protest, Tamer is granted a new passport to get her out of Iran. It's just in time too. When Tamer heads home, she's confronted by Arzu, who asks her quite what she was thinking regarding the protest. Eventually she's forced to head out on the road. As she does, the police swoop in to capture Eagle, believing Tamer to be with her, but it turns out to be a decoy. The real Tamer sneaks out without the police sniffing around. Unfortunately, she walks right into Arzu's daughter and two of her friends who happen to be on the other side of the protest early. Shakira and Sick Boy, Episode 4 of Tehran begins with Tamer leaving the apartment and finding Razia waiting for her. She starts beating down Tamer until a bystander high up on a balcony sees what's happening and shouts down to stop. Bloodied and bruised, Tamer stumbles away and manages to make it to Sick Boy's place to get patched up. Meanwhile, Faraz FaceTimes his wife not long after her surgery. With everything seemingly okay, he heads in to speak to a captured Masood. He throws down Jira's passport, but Masood feigns ignorance, telling him he doesn't know the girl. Faraz also throws down several pictures of the trail of dead bodies that seem to be following Jira. Masood's car was present at both crime scenes too, putting him squarely in the spotlight. It certainly looks suspect, and Masood's explanations aren't enough for Faraz to let him go just yet. Instead, he intensifies the interrogation by bringing in Salome to tell her side of the story. Specifically, he asks what she was doing on the 13th August. With a shaky voice, she admits that Masood and her were engaged in a temporary marriage. Back at Sick Boy's, Tamer tries to keep her nerves in check as she learns that the passport is going to take longer than expected. This is unfortunately partly thanks to Sick Boy's issues and need to sell drugs. It looks like he's mixed up in his own problems. In order to speed up the process, Tamer leaves to get the passport. Faraz's investigation leads him to Razia, and specifically who was staying with her. Trying to goad her with a promotion, Razia is forced to admit the truth in front of her parents. This means Hassan is going to prison and may well be hung as well. Only, Arzu suddenly speaks up and admits that she's to blame. She's the reason that Tamer was staying with them. With Hassan and Razia allowed to go home, Arzu admits her mistakes to the detective and apologizes. She reveals that Tamer stayed, but they kicked her out after the protest. Tamer's search lands her into trouble as she's forced to hide inside a walk-in closet, while two shadowy men start poking around. Desperate not to be found out by Faraz, they're eventually distracted by Sick Boy arriving at the door posing as a salesman. Knowing that Tamer is stuck inside, he proves the perfect distraction for Tamer to sneak out the back. As Sick Boy picks her up, they race across town away from this house. Back at his place, he asks Tamer just who she is and what her story is. Tamer is smart, playing up the Jira story and concocting a believable narrative to shift the focus away from her true identity. With a story under her belt, her passport photo is taken, and she prepares for what comes next. Meanwhile in Paris, a man named Salam arrives to take Faraz's wife to the airport. Only, he's seemingly not who he says he is. After putting the woman in the back and shutting the door, he phones someone secretly and starts to drive away. Something is clearly not right. The Other Iran, Episode 5 of Tehran begins with Faraz stepping outside and finding a phone on the ground. As it starts ringing, he receives a call confirming his wife is fine, but he has a mission. He needs to make sure Masood gets out of Iran unharmed. As they hang up, Faraz is left with a tough choice to make. He either betrays his country but saves his wife or sees her perish but remain loyal to his country. What a choice. This immediately sees him storm back into the jail cell, choking out Masood and desperate to learn the truth. Faraz drives Masood into the middle of nowhere and threatens him with a gun. Eventually he gives up and tells Masood to leave Iran. He certainly wastes little time making sure he does so in pain though. As Masad leaves, Faraz remains conflicted over his choice. With his wife safe for now, thanks to a controlled phone call from those who have her confirming as much, Masad communicates with Mossad and confirms they know about Princess. Much like Faraz, he's told to leave Iran that night. After hanging up, Faraz is called into his boss's office for an update. He lies, claiming that Masad has a big meeting, and he's gone over the department's head to try and catch Masad out for a mistake. On the back of this, Faraz and Masad meet in the dead of night. It's here he realizes that Masad had nothing to do with kidnapping his wife. Instead, Faraz puts his plan into action and forces Masad to work with him to catch out the Israelis. Meanwhile, Tamer is given some clothes from Milad and reluctantly attends a party. To get there, they head past a checkpoint, but things take a turn for the worst. The soldier misinterprets Tamer's thumbs up as giving him the finger. Thankfully, a bribe for both soldiers is enough to save the day and avoid any more unpleasantness. Tensions are understandably high, with Karim and Milad bickering over Tamer getting involved in their affairs. Eventually, the group make it to their destination, where Karim shows off his stash of drugs. This explains just why it was so crucial they get past the checkpoint without problems. The night draws on and Tamer's loyalty is put to the test as she starts dealing drugs. She passes Karim's test, but Tamer is understandably annoyed. Thankfully, Milad sits with her and eases the girl's mind, promising to let her experience the world. Eventually, he convinces her to take a pill, and that leads her into the bedroom with him where they make love. In the morning, Mossad keep tabs on Milad and learn that he and the others are up in the mountains just outside Tehran. Meanwhile, Masad receives a call from Eli at Turkish Airways, inquiring about his missed flight. Deciding against booking another, the scene changes to show who's on the other end of the line. It turns out this is another ploy from Mossad to get him back. Only, when he leaves his car he's shot dead by an assassin on a bike. Faraz does his best to interject, but it's too late. Masad is dead. The engineer, following the shocking death of Masad, episode 6 of Tehran, begins with Faraz phoning Mossad. He threatens to go after them and promises not to stop his crusade. On the back of this, Faraz speaks to his boss regarding Nahed's surgery. It's certainly not cheap, but he's convinced Faraz is hiding something, which we know he is. Unfortunately, this seems him suspended from duty. Ali offers his condolences and hopes he's reinstated soon. Just before Faraz leaves, he implores Ali to keep working on the case. There's still an agent operating in Tehran. Meanwhile, Gorov leads the team at Mossad into collecting up a list of names close to Tamer. He's still not sure that her plan will work, but Yale does her best to convince him otherwise. It seems to work too, and Tamer receives a call not long after confirming it's going ahead. Questioned over whether Milad is up to the task, she promises that he is. The operation begins and Tamer receives her instructions. The engineer is going to report a problem with the air conditioning. This will allow Tamer to conduct the second phase of her operation. Only, things clearly hit a snag when Milad receives a call from Karim, dissuading him from the task at hand. Hanging up, Karim turns his attention to fellow friend Shaham and tries to find details surrounding Tamer and whether she really works for an electric company or not. While he gets to work on this, Tamer is introduced to her contact, Param. Milad asks him for access into the data center where Tamer reveals what they plan to do. They're going to cut the power, but Param has cold feet. He doesn't want to get involved in this and worries it's the wrong way to go. Eventually, though, Tamer manages to convince him otherwise. In Bat Yam, Arazu phones Mordecai and asks for help. She's still in a jail cell and desperate for help. She pleads with him to help her leave Iran and tries to get through to him. As the camera pans out, we see her reading from a script given to her by Faraz, who watches with a keen eye. When the conversation ends, Faraz warns her that if she says anything to anyone, he'll make sure she never leaves that cell. Meanwhile, Tamer speaks to Milad about Param and encourages him to invite the man over for dinner. She wants to make sure there's no hiccups and everything goes according to plan. As the night draws on, Milad and Tamer share an intimate moment together. This sees him present a gift to her. However, they're both interrupted by Karim showing up and crashing the party. With Mossad listening, the entire situation spirals out of control as he asks who Tamer really is. He can't find her on social media and wants the truth over exactly what she's hiding. As everything starts getting out of hand, Tamer brandishes her gun, and a standoff ensues. All hell breaks loose as Mossad agent Mohammed shows up, shooting Kareem in the head and forcing Tamer's hand. When Parham shows up and realizes something is up, Tamer is forced to continue down this dark path and make him work with her. With the operation going ahead as scheduled, things are precarious to say the least. Yale asks Gorev to allow her to go and help, prompting him to think over what to do next. Elsewhere, Mordecai arrives at the hotel intending to help Arezou leave for Iran. Only, little does he know she's not actually there. It's Pavel instead who answers the door, claiming to be a family friend. Inviting him in, Pavel shuts the door, which is where the episode ends. Tamer's father, episode 7 of Tehran, begins with Ali heading into his office and receiving a message from Amir. He's sent over pictures from Faraz confirming he's keeping Mordecai hostage. As we skip across to the pair, Mordecai tries to plead with Faraz, but it's no good. He refuses to be swayed by his pleas that Arezou is only a computer technician. Faraz eventually receives his call from Mossad, telling him he shouldn't have taken Mordecai. Faraz bites back though, venomously rasping that they shouldn't have kidnapped his wife. This inevitably prompts them to hang up, with Mossad contemplating a prisoner exchange. While they wait, Faraz gets talking to Mordecai and learns more about his past. Specifically, they discuss Jerusalem and the trying times with his wife. Elsewhere, Gorev confronts Nehad and encourages her to calm him down. She scoffs, telling the Mossad agent this is what happens when you kidnap someone. She initially refuses to help until he convinces her to make the call. Faraz is hurt that she's speaking on their side, but she calms him down, admitting that she just wanted to hear his voice. With Mossad working on tracking down Faraz's signal, they eventually find it thanks to Nihad stalling and singing him a soothing song. Tamer awakens after her ordeal, echoes of the past shine through like a bad dream. For now, there's no news, but Tamer wants to speak to Milad. She's forbidden from doing so though, but she confronts Muhammad about it as things reach boiling point. If anything happens to him, it's on you. A knock at the door interrupts them though, as Yale returns to help execute their plan. Only, Parham is rattled by investigators checking the electrical grid, commenting on his skittish behavior. When Parham rings Tamer to warn her, she realizes they need Milad to help calm him down and convince the man to continue working with them. Only, that's easier said than done. Her first attempt is a failure, but thanks to Yale's encouragement, manages to eventually turn Milad to their side. He makes the call to Parham and reads out what Tamer has written down. Unfortunately, that includes blackmailing the man. Although he agrees to help, it turns out Parham's being watched, so the plan is not as foolproof as she thought. Still, Tamer and Yale prepare to leave, but when Tamer receives the message confirming Mordecai has been taken, she's rattled. Yale does her best to calm her down though as they drive up to the rendezvous point. Tamer is not of sane mind though, and struggles to find the system. Eventually she throws up on the side of the road. Faraz receives the call at the hotel confirming Mossad are on their way. With a gun pointed at Mordecai's head, Yale reports back to Mossad that Tamer is not able to operate effectively, given her family is involved in this. While they drive off, Faraz slips away leaving Mordecai knocked out in his room. With Mordecai safe for now, Tamer speaks to her father and learns that he's safe. Mossad rings Yale and tells her to head to the safe house. Only, they also tell her to make sure Muhammad kills the Iranian. That, of course, being time's up. The season 1 finale of Tehran sees the fateful moment arrive as Mossad prepare to strike. The pilots are 50 minutes away, and the target is set. Only, suddenly a flash sends the entire plan careering out of control. Meanwhile, Tamer and Yale start packing their things up ready to head out. Only, the orders to kill Milad don't sit well with her. She hesitates and eventually becomes suspicious when Gorev rings with new rules for Yale. She needs to make sure the skies are clear. If she fails, then this situation with Iran could turn toxic. Instead, they revert back to the original plan they had in mind. Faraz is picked up, and asks for details surrounding the Israeli agent. Obviously Ali is loath to tell him, but Faraz reveals that they've been betrayed by Muhammad. Unable to hear any more, Ali tells him to get out the car. Sighing, Faraz agrees and steps out, just as Ali promises to keep him posted. He does too, giving Faraz a crucial piece of intel to go on via text. Meanwhile, Yale briefs Tamer and tells her she needs to break inside the air base and has little time to do it. It's a risky plan and one that Tamer negotiates to keep Millet alive. It's a thin shred of hope and one that Tamer clings to as she speaks to Millet about the airbase plan. Eventually, he settles on an idea of using a fingerprint scanner to break in. Before he goes, Muhammad has some strong words for Millet before they hit the road. The trio make it to Millet's apartment, breaking into the computer and desperate to crack the system. Eventually the pair manage to do just that, scanning their own fingerprints to use in the near future. While they do, Faraz heads to his address posing as a grieving father. He asks whether they've seen Zara, and a young girl takes pity on him, telling Faraz that she hasn't seen Tamer in 2 days, but she's been around. This sees Faraz head up to the bedroom with the young girl, who asks for a key to get in. With time slipping away, Muhammad keeps watch, while the pair copy their details across. Time slips away, and the trio are forced to flee before the encryption can complete. Faraz breaks into Millet's room, but the others manage to get away. On the table he spies the fingerprint scanner and a post-it note, the latter he takes for himself. Phoning through to the department with the error code, he realizes that this relates to Abital Air Base and head off to investigate. There's 42 minutes to go until the planes make it to the border. Time continues to slip by as Tamer heads back to Yale. Apparently all the samples are intact. Disguised as Iranian soldiers, they head inside to park. Tamer and Millet manage to shake off Muhammad at the entrance, tricking him with the fingerprint scanner as his print fails to come back positive. Once in, Tamer tells Millet to get to the emergency exit and escape. She knows Yale is after him and gives the man his escape and the gift he originally gave to her. With Millet presumed safe for now, Tamer switches consumes to look like a cleaner and starts mopping the floor near the server room. As one of the workers heads in, Tamer seizes her opportunity and manages to find the right column. Outside, Faraz heads up to the air base and forces them to open up. He tells them the reason is classified, but reveals he's from the Revolutionary Guard. With the walls closing in around Tamer, she somehow manages to make it out, but Muhammad finds her without Millet and starts investigating. Faraz spies Tamer leaving the building and entering the car with Yale. Faraz follows in hot pursuit while phoning Ali, revealing he knows where Tamer is. As he heads to the scene, Tamer connects to the airbase server and seizes control. The Iranian border is shut down, and they reveal that the mission has been a success. Only, things aren't as simple as they seem. Despite breaching the server, it turns out they actually breached a dummy, and the Iranians were expecting her all along. The planes can be seen on the radar by the Iranians, but Yale is the one who's double-crossed them all. She holds a gun up to Tamer and tells her to step away from the laptop. Gunshots outside distract Yale as Faraz heads in and shoots her dead. Tamer hides in wait and shoots Faraz and knocks him down. With tail down, Tamer rings Mossad and reveals the planes are seen on the radar and they're about to walk into an ambush. Tamer turns and faces Faraz with the gun to his head. He comments how Mordecai is a noble man and implores her to stop. Thinking twice, he tells her that his wife's life is in her hands. Heading out, Tamer finds Muhammad with a bullet through his throat. All hell breaks loose in the air, and the Iranians fire down as Mossad, Gorev especially, watch on in stunned shock. Meanwhile, Millet and Tamer take the cliffhanger ending sets the scene nicely for a possible second season, as Millet and Tamer leave on the former's bike. All hell breaks loose between the Iranians and Mossad, backdropped nicely by the cat-and-mouse game that's been brewing all season long. Yale's betrayal is surprising and a nice twist, while the entire incident at the airbase was suitably tense as Tamer started to break into the servers. That's to say nothing of the moments at Millet's apartment, which were equally as nail-biting. Still, the series comes to a decent end, although one can't help but feel we need a second season to follow on from this.